Obrigada, thank you, Teresa. I have a presentation. Okay. Bom, em primeiro lugar, eu gostaria de compartilhar com vocês a emoção de estar no primeiro evento presencial desde que teve início a pandemia de Covid-19. E vindo de uma instituição tão dedicada a superar essa grave crise sanitária como instituição de ciência e tecnologia do nosso país, vinculada com a Instituição de Ciência e Tecnologia do Ministério da Saúde, é uma grande satisfação. Agradeço ao convite do Fórum de Organizadores, do Fórum Mundial de Economia e de Bioeconomia e também ao convite do governador Helder Barbalho. E vou tentar aqui compartilhar com vocês algumas dessas ideias. A primeira questão que eu gostaria de colocar, nós estamos sendo...
The first issue I would like to mention is that we are being invited to think about the future as one of the pillars in bioeconomy. And I start with the historical record of an expedition carried out by Carlos Chagas of the Osvaldo Cruz Institute in the beginning of 1913 to the region of Rio Cachoeira in the Amazon. During that expedition, the scientists drew attention to the importance to consider the Amazon and the relationship between the forest and the weather. And being here for the first time in this bioeconomy forum in Brazil for the first time and in the Amazon for the first time, I think this is something important to remember. At the same time, I would like to invite to our dialogue a thinker from Pará, who in the 1950s participated in the discussion of the Amazon. He said at the time that when we talk about the Amazon complexity, this applies mostly to the land more than to men. The human condition faced to the nature here really creates a geographical problem. This would be considered controversial nowadays, but in any case, the point I would like to make here is that as we look to the future, what expects us is a systemic view. We talk also from the viewpoint of the Osvaldo Cruz Foundation. Its headquarters are in Rio de Janeiro, but it is present in all Brazilian regions. And in the Amazon region, it is represented by the Leonidas Mariachini Institute and the Rondônia Institute, but it has several cooperations around the state of Pará. One of the central elements for us to think about this issue from the viewpoint of the relationship between the bioeconomy and health has to do with the 2030 agenda. According to this agenda, and I would like to point this out, it is important to highlight the critical thinking in all topics related to health and to society. This is essential for development. At the same time, we have to promote the biodiversity products in Brazil, because health is the major and best indicator of sustainability that there can be. And we right now, living through the COVID-19 pandemic, understand that very clearly. Fiocruz has also participated very actively in the national medicinal plants and phytomedications in Brazil as a means to guarantee sure access to the use of medicinal plants for the Brazilian population. I believe this policy is strategic right now. Recently, in view of the need to reply or to respond to the epidemic, I would like to mention 2 points. First of all, the need for an integrated view on social factors and environmental factors to do with health. We've been working on that. And in this process of thinking how to march into the future beyond this crisis provoked by the pandemic, we have to understand which social needs are generated, and the view of the bioeconomy and the view of the sustainable use of our diversity will be very important in this process. I recommend to all the biodiversity recommendations and COVID-19 publication that you will find in your folders. I would also like to mention that our activities focus on 6 basic leaflets, so to speak: biology and health, education, support to vulnerable populations, always from a viewpoint of working with populations, not for populations, considering their engagement, their leaderships, and their participation. And we also work very strongly on education. This is the current challenge. How can we think the future in these dimensions that are discussed here in the Bioeconomy Forum? I believe that in order to treat them, it is essential for us to understand bioeconomy for sustainable development. As most of you know, there is a whole history since the beginning of this discussion related to the use of biomass, all the way to the current view on bioeconomy that was enshrined in the World Bioeconomy Forum in 2018. Preservation and conservation of biological resources and knowledge, science, and innovation are all required to promote product and services in every economic sector for the economy to be sustainable. I believe this is the view that may prevail and provide us a sustainable view of the future. Along this line, we highlight bioeconomy and the 2030 agenda and all the objectives of sustainable development. All the activities in Pará remind us of the need to guarantee sustainability by adopting bioeconomic solutions. In bioeconomy, and I refer here to employment in the European Union and in the UK. But I will also talk about the potential of some very important aspects related to the loss of biodiversity and climate changes, based on the work by Paulo Artacho, who studies the issue of biodiversity and climate change. In blue, we have the negative impact of the biodiversity losses And in red, we have negative impacts affecting health in general. There is a growing demand for health services, and this can also be affected by the forest fires in the Amazon region. There is a whole agenda being discussed currently by the WHO. There is an increase of non-transmissible chronic diseases and the emergence of infectious diseases. There is also the comeback of old diseases that we thought was stamped out before. So this pandemic has social and environmental effects caused by a virus that can be transmitted in social circumstances, like SARS-CoV-2. We must mention the reemergence of certain diseases such as yellow fever, even in areas where it was not common before. All of this requires a careful look at the issue of climate changes and the increase of diseases carried by vectors. Urban health throughout Latin America is always related to these diseases such as dengue, chikungunya, and others. We cannot speak about health nowadays without thinking about climate changes and biodiversity. This means we need to consider all this in our agenda for the future. Being in the Amazon, it is important to draw attention to the fact that the Brazilian legal Amazon covers 60% of the national territory, 14% of the population lives here, and they represent 9% of the Brazilian GDP. Now, the view of the riches in this region and this biodiversity, well, this has an impact on the living conditions of the population here. The potential of bioeconomy in Brazil is extremely important. Brazil contains huge biodiversity, about 1.8 million species, and most of the new drugs that are approved to be traded are the result of biological resources developed based on molecules found in nature. It is one of the regions with most capacity to digest carbon in the world. And I would like to underline two projects where we are directly involved. That is Fiocruz and other institutions, and the municipal secretariat in the case of the first project, the municipal secretariat of Jabaetuba here in Pará. This is a project focusing on the sustainable handling of açaí, which is a very important crop. I would like to underline that an integrated view is important. Açaí is involved in the possibility of transmission of Chagas disease. And to deal with that, there are scientific solutions, and mostly solutions resulting from the integrated view that we are provided by the SUS system, the Sistema Único de Saúde. One project I would like to point out is what we call Articula Fito. It is a project focusing on phytotherapeutic networks. We have an agreement here with groups of women focusing on the extraction of andiroba, a local plant. And this project is based on value chains of medicinal plants. We also have the participation of the Ministry of Agriculture and Supplies. And it is very important to have this integrated perspective of this type of agriculture. There are also challenges that I consider the main ones. These 7 challenges I consider the main ones in Brazil: environmental sustainability, demography, the challenge of overcoming inequality, the challenge of science, technology, and innovation, how to promote development, thinking of development sustainability, technology and information. We are using these resources here during our forum, but we know we're also the victims of phenomena such as fake news and the capacity to obtain information, obtain data, and to use these data in a democratic manner. We have labor to take into account, and we also have what I call the main challenge of all, which is the democratic challenge. Because we cannot think about bioeconomy without considering democracy as a central issue. Certain developments happen without democratic conditions, but in our case, the democracy and the social participation are essential pillars for development. Well, as responses to these challenges in our vision of the future, I consider the environmental issue, which means to add value to biomass, implying knowledge of traditional information. And it also includes the monitoring of biological resources with the use of new technologies, and also a view on the bioeconomy as a factor to generate work in the various regions. This is why, for the future, this axis of bioeconomy and health are essential for a sustainable future. The pandemic has revealed several structural vulnerabilities in our society, and we have to better use our biological resources. Finally, last but not least, and the next panels will go deeper into these issues. They will talk about other territories where bioeconomy products can be developed. But it is strategic to develop a virtuous dynamic where the social aspect may be promoted by the use of sustainable resources. And for that, we have the vision of an economy as being a privileged space to generate knowledge, jobs, and health. And in this respect, to associate traditional knowledge to technological and scientific knowledge, and this will be able to guide us into the future. It is very important to deepen these discussions, such as the ones we're having in this forum. I would like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nísia, President of the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation under the Ministry of Health in Brazil. This was a different perspective than we have been discussing these 2 days. I think extremely timely, very, very timely, the impacts of the loss of the biodiversity and climate change in public health. I think it's extremely important, and I think the forum had a very, very good point in introducing this topic in the agenda. So the impact on health, particularly after those almost 2 years that we have been living under these health conditions. So thank you, muito obrigada, doutora Nísia Trindade Lima, muitíssimo obrigada. And now I would like to...
Thank you very, very much.
Our next speaker. Her name is Fuiri Tembe, and she's a representative of the native people of the Amazon, and she is the president of the Federation of Indigenous People from the state of Pará, FEPIPA. Então, tenho o prazer, o gosto de chamar aqui ao palco Fuiri Tembe, que é a presidente da Federação das Comunidades Indígenas do Estado do Pará.
Obrigada, boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
Boa tarde a todas.
Good afternoon,
Todos, a todos,
all of you.
Boa tarde ao povo, em especial ao povo da Amazônia.
Especially, I wish to greet the people of the Amazon, my relatives, the chief
Quero tirar a máscara.
of my tribe. I'm going to remove this mask.
Bom, não sou considerada palestrante.
I am not considered a speaker here.
Considerada
I am considered
indígena,
a native
vive na Amazônia, que
dweller
luta nessa
of the
luta.
Amazon
Não
region,
me considero palestrante, não me considero
living
técnica, como
as
algumas
a
pessoas
militant here.
aqui.
I do not consider myself a technician. I am not a thinker like the great thinkers who have been here before me. I would like to thank the organizers of the forum for giving me this opportunity to address you. I'm not speaking on behalf of my people, I'm speaking on behalf of the Amazon. I wish to thank the government of the state of Pará for hosting this forum. I wish to thank the coordinator who had faith in the Amazon region, in the state of Pará, and in Brazil. And I thank Secretary Mauro, Secretary for the Environment, because he helped the native peoples of the state of Pará to be represented here. I also thank the Secretariat of Culture for helping the native peoples to be represented. I would like to greet you all to the state of Pará, wish you all to welcome to the state of Pará, to the Amazon, and to Brazil. No doubt Brazil is made of biodiversity. Diversity in peoples, diversity in persons and lives. And we are here to speak about bioeconomy. Well, it's very painful, because once again, traditional populations have been through a test of resilience represented by the pandemic. The pandemic arrived to take life away from mankind. And the native peoples had to survive this pandemic. So it's very difficult to talk about biodiversity. And talking about the economy doesn't make sense to us if we are not assured to have a territory. So the intellectuals and the people who came here to hear about the economy, for us, native peoples of the Amazon, it only makes sense if we are guaranteed that we will have our territory. We have to guarantee life. Dear guests, listen to the world. It is important to defend the Amazon, to defend life, because we shall only have this famous bioeconomy. The name is very nice. Sustainable economy. But how can you see the sustainable bioeconomy that we're all talking about? No one can see it, but we've been doing it for thousands of years, for centuries. Unfortunately, we are not visible to show the bioeconomy that we adopt in our lives.
The fight of indigenous peoples for the guarantee in life. So when we're fighting for our land, it is the same as fighting for standing forest and defending the air this planet breathes. We're not just looking after the peoples of the Amazon and of Brazil, we're also looking after the planet. So I'm just giving you some food for thought. I want to thank Teresa, who spoke before me. She shared data with you during her explanation. She shared important data showing the diversity of Brazil, the world. I didn't bring you any data. I didn't bring any studies to be projected on a screen. I brought you the pain that we feel on our skin. That's the pain traditional peoples, indigenous peoples feel. You must consider the participation of indigenous peoples, traditional peoples in the Amazon. It was nothing. It was zero. We didn't take part in any of them. The organizers of this forum did not consider that they were coming to Brazil, to the Amazon, to Pará. Do you know how many indigenous inhabitants there are in Pará? 70,000. And there are only a handful of them in here today. We could have many more indigenous peoples participating in these forums, more diversity, because it's time to show people more than just data, but the real biodiversity of the Amazon. So I would like to ask the organizer of this forum that in the next editions of the forum to really consider local populations, whether it be in Brazil or in whatever country it may be. You must consider that these are the peoples that make up bioeconomy. Bioeconomy is not just about researchers. It's about those at the forefront, at the front line. Thank you for allowing us to participate. We were able to get here through a lot of resistance, but the organizers of forums like this need to consider where the next forum will be held and consider traditional peoples, local traditional peoples. You can't continue to talk about us without us. Enough, enough. That cannot continue. The indigenous peoples are here and we will be forever here to say enough. Enough talking for us. I want to share a fact with you. Bringing a forum such as this to a country that ignores, doesn't look after its own people as its own is a tough thing. Anyway, I won't take up any more of your time. I know we're running late. There are other people to speak after I am finished, but I do want to say something. I have a message for you. And my message to you is there will only be sustainable bioeconomy if we have what? Land demarcation now.
Só teremos, de fato, país sustentável, mundo sustentável.
We will only have a sustainable country, a sustainable planet, if we have people in government who believe in this possibility, who believe in development. We're not against development. Traditional peoples, indigenous peoples are not against development. We do want the development of this country, but we also want to be heard. And that's why we stand together to say to Brazil and to this forum, out with Bolsonaro.
Fora Bolsonaro!
Out with Bolsonaro. Out with Bolsonaro. Thank you.
Eu fiquei refletindo muito para poder falar aqui, por conta da participação dos povos indígenas.
I thought a lot about what I was going to say here because there were hardly any representatives of the indigenous communities here, practically none. So I gave it a lot of thought and I realized that we shouldn't miss the opportunity to say that Brazil, that this country can be a better country. It can have fair and dignified development, but only if we remove that thing that is currently governing this country.
Muito obrigada, Tuir. Foi muito
Thank you very much, Tubir, very inspiring. Your words, your speech has shown us the true Amazon. And I think that was a great thing to make us all think and reflect. I did hear a few shared points with our event and bioeconomy, so social biodiversity. That should be advanced, and it is a large part of bioeconomy. We did hear a lot about that. We still have a long way to go, but as we've been saying since the beginning, yesterday morning, one size doesn't fit all, which means there isn't such a thing as an overall bioeconomy. It must consider the specificities of local populations, traditional populations, and national populations. So thank you very much for your words and for giving us some food for thought. Very appropriate. And now we have a video showing local peoples, traditional people, so that we can get to know them a little bit more.
We got here now, and I think there are some common points with what we've been discussing here for 2 days, and that's the social biodiversity. So to extend this reflection and this talk, we have now a video that talks about a great figure from the Assurini people. Her name is Murukava Assurini, and she was married to the village shaman for 55 years. After his death, she is the person who holds all the traditional knowledge of chants, prayers, and plants to cure her people. So very much into the topic of health as well as this panel is about. So as the native people says here in Brazil, the traditional way will be the future. Let's watch this, her touching story. Por favor.
Maracau wagat, maracau wayera rimina ngavako. Ini cara mutayara letivu tata pandemia avirenga yande jemu avire mutali. Ema cara mengu puyere pandemia ti io itayara me. Maira la me ora Roma o ya patenya para que gatti per me eu marina me gao eu toche memo nina me gao eu ana. Yande eu pavumo kainga mungara me ta etipena yale eu ora. Ganna yande eu ora. Que ataku na que me I aka umina ka waka a taja eu kuia I te kwata I bupe a o mongi I we ma aminge ma me ka o je fonu ma te pe mongi ku we parete jo ina ga futira era ona mo ya era ona tako fonu pirama mai pu fonu aje mingaya ni pawa ne de mongi ka marina I kanya Ingin ano ko panay pena no avavina ro ki ara pialema panya andara piata ai ai pene marina ai ne da mo kta muje piata ai ya ni pawale mari pangira na pavine panya pa no no aje che kana me ya kapanya yar mo pani pe pinai Ini membuat pengen membuat kau purata, negara ngerupi orang jiwa ngerupi, ini pengen pengen kasih peo, ayah berpe, cepet, mau ikannya, mau teter, ada tak ada kau, ya mau pokoknya kawan no, pai mereka yang ngerupi. Mo agawa papaya mo ipiwe nyandu peno tando pun ngapono
Amen. Echai tubira amen pai kinga
da kaya mo yande kale mara pun yande kale tipa futale yande karu mo kanyi ma futale yande mama ya pawa ibu le tipa ko futale yande oro eme ima penjete ma era mo pun nei ya ambu engi amira munga je wana pifera kara ma pia ko ele me mbo esfera ngi mundera ngi mu eura matu yang mu ewa era me papanena ma ini pangkara mamu mereka kuawale.
Pass knowledge forward. That's, I didn't hear, não ouvi a palavra em português, mas é passar para o futuro o
I didn't
conhecimento.
hear the word in Portuguese, but it is past knowledge forward.
So, once again, muito obrigada por deixar-nos essas reflexões, Tuir. E
So
agora,
once again, thank you kindly for your words, Tubir. And we will now move on to our next panel.
bioeconomy in a global context. And guess what? All the panelists are present here. So thank you for that. May I call the moderator of this panel, Ricardo Abramovay. He's Professor of Environmental Program, the University of São Paulo. And his panelists, Tatiana Shore, Flora Tibazarwa, Gabriela Bianchi dos Santos, and Roberto Vac. Ricardo, agora é a sua vez.
Muito obrigado, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone. Nós decidimos de última hora.
Teresa, and thank you, everyone. We decided to let the participants of the panel to speak in their language of preference, because we have simultaneous translation, so everyone will speak slowly so that the interpreters can follow us. It is a joy to be here. Thank you very much, Luca Cantolo, Marcelo Brito. Congratulations for the organization of this forum of bioeconomy. It's a very important initiative. This panel is something that we came to the conclusion that the people of the Amazon decided together what we want to say. The question is as follows. If you look at the scientific and technological bibliography and biography of the science and progress of bioeconomy, it's shocking to see the fact that the tropical forests are absent in the literature and in this bibliography. It's shocking. This is only one fact, not to mention everything. You know, that we were listening to something so touching would
we would have to organize a roundtable specifically about the role of the tropical forest in the contemporary bioeconomy. But besides this, we have a gigantic paradox, which is the fact that in the tropical forest that concentrates the largest biosocial diversity of the planet is where we have the worst social indicators, the highest level of degradation, the biggest threat to the human freedom, the permanent invasion, especially in the last 2 years, systematically and supported publicly from the point of view of the government, from the federal government, which they have a narrative according to which the indigenous lands are too big, in excessively large, but they are fundamental not only for the indigenous populations and the biodiversity of the Amazon, but also for the enormous challenges of our times, which is the climate crisis and the erosion of biodiversity. So it's about this topic. It's about the role of the tropical forests in the bioeconomy, contemporary bioeconomy, the social biodiversity, the social geobiodiversity, as Tatiana prefers to call it. It's about this that we're going to talk about, with the expectation that we may in this way strengthen a sort of an agreement about the intelligent and rational use inspired in democratic values, humanistic values of our biggest wealth. So I have the enormous pleasure to now give the floor to my colleague that I have just met, Flora Ismail. She came from Tanzania, and I have Flora's mini bio, and I'm going to read that Flora is the program
Innovation Support Program. She has over 9 years of leadership in national research and innovation institutions. She headed a public university department for 6 years and has held the position of Director of Life Science at the National Science, Technology and Innovation think tank, COSTEC, for more than 4 years. Flora is passionate about sustainable transformation using green and blue solutions and shares this with other international players as a member of the International Advisory Committee of the Global Bioeconomy Council. Flora, please.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers of the Bioeconomy Forum for inviting me to Brazil. I always love coming to Brazil, so it is an honor for me to be in the Bethlehem of the South. Really, really excited to be here. I thank you all also for listening to me, in case I don't get the opportunity to do that at the end, as I've seen that the sessions are very exciting and they get very short very quickly. I don't need this. So I'd just like to share a little bit about where I work, on the program that I work, which is the Southern African Innovation Support Program. This is a Finnish-funded initiative. It's development finance, and it is in 5 African governments of South Africa, Tanzania, Botswana, Namibia, and Zambia, and working with the regional economic bloc. So the focus of the support is really to strengthen regional and national innovation ecosystems. The mechanisms that we use is really to work with multipliers, recognizing that we are a catalytic program, so we don't have enough resources like a lot of programs, and just trying to stimulate the support to build innovation ecosystems. Working with multipliers is our strategy, and trying to create that footprint of what you need to build strong institutions, because for sustainability, we have confidence, and I've heard it being resonated in the conference in the last 2 days, that having strong partnerships, strong institutions is one way of ensuring sustainable outcomes. And so we are very much in favor of that approach. We take a consortium approach because we value the opportunities, what boundaries bring to us. Despite the fact that we are independent countries, we recognize that there's a lot of cross-border collaboration, and if it is structured and supported in a positive manner, then there's opportunity for us to contribute to sustainable wealth. And when it comes to environmental matters, then we know that this is very important, that we recognize what each country has at hand. So the program looks at the opportunities that entrepreneurs in the South can benefit from the North and also benefit from each other. So it supports South-South collaboration and North-South collaboration. When we select the projects that we are supporting, so we have a selection of about 26 consortia, our priority lens is one that looks at environmental sustainability, human rights-based approaches, and gender. So we take human or social considerations as part of the excellence of looking at the innovative solutions that the project brings as part of its application. So I'm going to use the opportunity on this panel, because we're talking about forests, to use one of the projects that is working in the forestry sector, and allow me to lay out first the context of what their application and their activities are. Our population, this is a project based in Tanzania, which is where I'm from, in East Africa. Our population size is about 56 million people. The land mass is slightly short of 9.5 million square kilometers. That's the land mass. It's the third largest country on the continent, but you know it fits several times, I think 5 times into the size of Brazil. So it's not a big country at that, but for Africa, it's one of the bigger giants. The forestry cover in Tanzania is about 37.7%. It's quite substantial. And it's not tropical forest, but it's very similar to the forests in semi-arid Brazil. So we have a lot of geographic similarities in that regard, and a lot of ecosystem similarities. Our GDP as a country, as of last year, was about 63 billion US dollars, so relatively substantive for a developing country. We have been doing relatively well on the Global Innovation Index that came out last month. Again, we went a little bit down, but as last year, the last 2 years, we did quite substantively well. And so we are developing. The city where I live is the fastest growing in Africa, is second fastest in the world. So you can see we have huge demands in terms of our bioresource requirements. A lot of the forestry goes into domestic consumption. And so this particular project set its challenge, and I'll talk about the challenge, the solution, and what the impact they want to create is. So they came up with a very vivid challenge for us, which is the demand for wood products. Our country, despite having 37% coverage of forestry, still has a $15 million import of wood products. Why? Because the quality of the wood that we have is not adequately suitable for the needs that we have for wood products. And most of the clearance, which goes to creating new areas for agriculture using slash and burn mechanisms, contributes to more than almost 1% of forest lost every year. So we lose about 400,000 hectares just because we slash and burn and use fuel wood and biomass for energy production. So it is not a very sustainable system, and we have a very low silviculture practice. We have about 24,000 hectares of production forest that is mainly eucalyptus and grevillea. So this particular project came up with the idea that they would integrate the production forest with an ICT technology, because a lot of it is using conservative production mechanisms, which excludes the opportunity for disruptive actors like young startups to enter these markets, because you know it's capital intensive to have these large plantations and monitor the growth and extraction of the wood from these areas. So using a Finnish partner, Risitech, they came up with a GPS handheld technology, Astra X, and this allows them to be able to monitor the growth of the forest remotely, cutting out a lot of the labor requirement and the capital requirement for doing a lot of the menial work that is needed. And using this technology, you see from, and I think we had this discussion yesterday as well, the integration between the digital world and a bioeconomic initiative, and seeing how this can really disrupt the market. So these young startups, 9 of them, have started using this technology, and it's allowed them to create substantive impact. They have generated jobs. They can monitor the growth of their smallholder farms in real time, and they have accurate data that they can report on for accessing credit, because one of the things that we have, at least in our country at the moment, is a pilot for using agricultural returns to access credit. So another financing mechanism that probably is also of use for Brazil. So what do we do as the Southern African Innovation Support Program? Our role in this is, one, to provide them with access to the technology by allowing them, facilitating the partnership with Finland, that they can procure the technology from Finland, they can access the capacity building. We help them with market validation, and that is really our main role, allowing these innovative solutions to be validated in new markets, and where necessary, allowing them also to scale to new markets. So we provide them with the capacity building of understanding how do you validate your prototype, your process, your service, how do you access funding. We help them also link to investment financing, because that's some of the capacity building that we provide them with. And then we allow them to access platforms where they can market their ideas and the solutions. So we have those 3 pillars where we provide matching funding, we provide them with capacity building, and then we allow them to profile, or we support them in profiling their results and their solutions. And in all this, we as development finance, obviously we do not take any equity, but we recognize that they have to understand very critical things like intellectual property. They have to understand the role and opportunity for partnerships. They have to understand what the policies are, especially when they're scaling to other countries. And they've encountered certain challenges, but they've also understood quite a few of the opportunities that they can push when some innovative solutions don't work in your own market, where you can push them going forward. So I'd like to just share that now.
Muito obrigado, Flora, por esse conjunto de informações tão interessante.
Thank you so much, Flora, for this very interesting set of information. We also see that these are destructive actions, and there has been an effort to fight against this. I should have extended my thanks not only to the direct organizers of this forum, but also to the government of the state of Pará, specifically Mario Almeida, the secretary, Governor Barbalho, who has done an extraordinary work in an effort to fight against the destruction. And more than that, he has to permit the appearance of an economy of the forest social bioeconomy, not only for the forest areas, but also for the family agriculture, agribusiness, and even the cities of the state of Pará. On behalf of them, the consortium of governors of the Amazon region that have had such an important role in this sense. Now I would like to give the floor to Tatiana Shore. Before anything else, Tatiana Shore is a tireless researcher in the field. Now she's the executive secretary of the Secretariat of Science and Technology of the state of the Amazon, which is in the Secretariat of Planning. She continues to go out on the field. She continues not only visiting the people of the forest, but the very distant and far away municipalities and groups, because she's in a government function, but she's a person from the academia. She's an economist. She has a master's in geography, doctor's degree in environmental science. I had the honor of being her coach. And also she was visiting professor at the University of Columbia, where she received an award called Ruth Cardozo. She was a Fulbright fellow. And so she was also a secretary in which she had activities in the government of the state of the Amazon. So Tatiana worked together with Robert Vack in an effort not to define the bioeconomy, but to define the diversity of the characteristics of bioeconomy in very interesting documents. And I recommend that you should consult these documents, read them for in total agreement of the Amazon. And I think this is what Tatiana is going to tell us about. Welcome. Well, thank you, Ricardo. I would like to thank the organizers, Yuka and Nina. Nina, I don't know if you're here or not, but I would like to thank you enormously for the effort of organizing us, because it's not easy to organize all of us. And as Ricardo says, since 2019, from the beginning of 2009, I was called for science and technology and innovation. And we did the first innovation that was to put in the pluriannual, in the state of Amazon, a structural program called BioEconomy Amazonas, because it's not only for the Secretary of the Environment or of Rural Secretariat. No, it belongs to a series of huge actions. We're talking about something different and not the things that everybody talks about. So the coordinator of this program in the state, I am the coordinator. And as Ricardo says, that I love to go to the interior, speak to the people and the indigenous. I never imagined that I was going to set up a program without a project, without having all the different people from the society. 90% or more of its native forest is alive. So this is why I'm telling you, it's important to know we have a very substantial number of indigenous populations. We have groups that have very little contact, which is another challenge. But then when we start looking at this reality, we cannot only look at the forest. We have the industrial center in Manaus, and that's where the interesting broth starts to talk about economy. We held a series of events, chats with specific groups, and finally, together with a consultation for the Amazon that Roberto will explain better, we started setting up a working group for bioeconomy, and last year we launched the theoretical framework of what we're talking about, because this is a dispute in the conceptual field. So we have to take sides. We have to, the indigenous population has also to position itself in bioeconomy. Why do we have to position ourselves? Because that's where public policies are going to come from. We have built this bioeconomical framework having as a basic premise that we had to bring everyone close to us, because the worst thing we can do in this historical moment of Brazil is to exclude people from the debate. No, we have to get out of our bubbles. We cannot only talk to people that agree with us. So we have to invite people that don't agree with us. So we set up, I'm going to call them scales of bioeconomy. I will explain. The first scale is social bioeconomy. What is that? Because it has to do with the production the relation of society with nature, of the land worker, the indigenous, the quilombola of former slaves, and in the indigenous land, whether there are um, outlined or not. And when we're talking about this scale, this implies in a set of safeguards and a series of policies, of actions that are very specific for this. We have to be very careful to do this right. This is the bioeconomy scale, but this is not the only one that we have in the Amazon. The second one that we have is the bioeconomy of forest base, which is the one that we're used to ever since the discovery of Brazil. So it goes through the area called Sertão, and then there was the era of rubber, and we're going to call imperfect and incomplete markets with an enormous asymmetry of information during all the chain of social bioeconomy. But we don't have really strong data, robust data to talk about bioeconomy. We talk about the nuts, but we don't have the laboratory structure in the Brazilian Amazon region to certify the quality of the nuts. And this was a conversation, a very interesting one called by Roberto, which is the bioeconomy that produces cattle, soybean. But how are we going to bring this bioeconomy close to us? We have to bring us, it has to be less competitive, because in bioeconomy, it generates violence. So the Amazon region is an area of violence. Pará and south of Amazon, and it's really violence, it's people die, people get killed. And we also have to start seeing how to bring these actors, how these players closer for a soja, soybean, corn, and grains. We also have the side of high technology, like, for example, Amazonia 4.0. Well, this is wonderful, but it hasn't happened yet. So let's be clear about what we really have, what we want, and how we want to get there. In this construction, we continue because we never stop. It's not something that stops. It's something that the more people that we talk about, the more we bring people closer, the more we grow. So we started with a forum of investment of bioeconomy that happened in June. And the process of organization of this forum drew our attention that we had to define principles. Principles. This I learned with Ricardo sitting here. What are the principles that rule that I'm going to consider as bioeconomy? And we published a technical note about the concept of this. First principle, conservation of biodiversity. Point. Full stop. Açaí, the monoculture that only uses açaí that is produced by Embrapa, that use pesticides, that is not dignified in its work. Is that for us? No. Put it on the side. It's something else. It's no problem. Let's not call it the same thing. Otherwise, we'll get very confused in the future. So the first one is set aside. The second principle is the principle of decreasing the inequalities in social and territorial inequality. We have the worst indicators of everything. I think Nísia is not here, but it's the worst indicator of several diseases, all kinds of cancer, of malaria, of dengue, the worst education of basic sanitation, whatever you mention, we have the worst score. So you can't think of a development process that will have in its base the bioeconomy that hasn't already incorporated in the development process the decrease of social, territorial, and for Amazon as well as all the other Brazilian biomas, because this is a very serious issue in Brazil. If we do not put identify this. We're not going to have bioeconomy. We're still going to have drug trafficking and people gold panning in the rivers because they go to the gold panning, they go to the drug trafficking, etc. I think I don't have to explain that. Everybody knows. The third principle, which is very important, is the role of technology innovation. When we think of technology innovation, people throw all this to the future like nanotechnology. Oh, great, it is part. We have a scope of science and technology, but we have an importance which is very important in the Amazon intelligences. An article was published this year that when we lose the indigenous languages, we lose the information about all these phytotherapeutical medication made with plants, because the medicinal plants. So the role of science goes according to the role of the scale of bioeconomy and according to what you can really do. And the fourth principle was a very good conversation that I had with Marcelo Brito that was, it's pointless for us to think about the economy of the standing forest. Otherwise, they're going to have three people with three trees struggling to keep talking about keeping the forest, the trees alive. We want more biodiverse forest. We want scale, and we have to recover the degraded areas and expand our biomes because the Cerrado and the Atlantic forest. Otherwise, we're already in such a critical moment that we have to do. And everybody says, yes, let's go and spend. Who's going to prepare the seedlings? Who has seeds? No one. He just told me I have to conclude, wrap up. Well, this definition of bioeconomy is very important because otherwise we don't know how to structure public policy. What are we doing? We have a law for the environmental protection from 2016, which is excellent. I'm not going to simply discard a law because it came from the government. No, I am changing it a little bit, and we're going to do this together with the Amazon population, a program of bioeconomy that will be on public procurement. This is as much as I can say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana. I will comment on this very interesting presentation afterwards. And I repeat, this frame Tatiana described on bioeconomy is published on a magazine called Página 22. It's easy to find. And I think it's also in English. It's published in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. And this is very important because we are used to taking the definition of the World Forum on bioeconomy, the OECD definition, and we became used to 3 or 4 definitions. And as this paper shows, the whole process is impoverished, the process of bioeconomy, because the organizational and social basis are going to be discussed by Roberto next. Roberto Wack is an entrepreneur. I have his biography here. He is an intellectual and a social entrepreneur. He was the first person to carry on a forest concession in Brazil. He dealt with a bureaucracy that is not used to people who do things legally. They're only used to dealing with people working illegally. So the surprise and the mismatch between a legal initiative and the current habits taught him a lot. Afterwards, he had a very important participation in Renova, and he is now in the BioEconomy Institute. And he will talk about the consultation for the Amazon, which represents the widest and most diversified and deep and programmatic front against fundamentalist fanaticism that prevails in our country. Therefore, the importance of consultation, not just for the Amazon, but also for the putting together of a civilized, democratic, innovative program for Brazil. Besides, Roberto is a fellow of Chatham House, and he is part of the board of Marfrig. In the Marfrig board, there are traditional council members and also some activists that represent more or less what Tatiana was saying. This transformation will come and is coming from the capacity to hold a rational dialogue that these new members have. Thank you very much. I thank you very much for the opportunity given to me to address you. I will try to bring some information on what is behind this consultation for the Amazon. The idea here is a consultation for the Amazon. The idea a consultation is very important because the Amazon is too rich to be submitted to just one consultation. It is necessary for us to penetrate as deeply as possible in all this riches and this biodiversity. Bioeconomy is central here.
Hoje, mais ou menos umas 400 lideranças empresariais.
So this movement gathers around 400 business leaders, companies, governments, the federal government, some entities that are under the federal government, several state and municipal organizations. So the participation is as wide as possible so as to give the whole initiative greater depth and knowledge to this discussion on the Amazon. And it is based on 4 pillars. The first of them is that we're talking about a model of development for a very rich region in social and physical assets. The models were used are not appropriate to fit a region as rich as the Amazon. So this discussion is around what is a development model based on greater balance between natural, human, and economic capital. The developments we normally see were developed in the Northern Hemisphere, and they were adapted there, but they never took into account the power and the wealth of this natural, cultural, and human capital that we have in the region. So what is a new development model? The challenge is one of the challenges in consultation. What Tatiana presented as the various principles in bioeconomy certainly apply to this new model, which in a way is still being built. Consultation tries to recognize that this is a process of getting to know that is going deeper. Now it needs to be systematized, and every now and then they must produce a document a document is being taken to the COP26 on the challenges and complexity of the Amazon, but this a deeper immersion outlines a universe in which we can format the new models. Another central element in consultation is that we cannot do without businesses, large businesses in this consultation, along with small businesses, startups. The business world must participate in this discussion strongly. The civil society has a huge contribution to offer. Its value is immense, but the active participation of the business sector in this discussion is fundamental. Tatiana mentioned Marcelo Brito bringing this component to the consultation, and this is essential for this plunge into a new model to be something really powerful. The third aspect is that the new models need to have a new institutional situation. The rules of the game have to change, public policies have to change, and the relationship between the various players in public policies must change in order to welcome the new models. The institutional model, which is just for people, cannot hold all that is at stake here. So I think it is very important to have South-South interaction, pan-Amazonic cooperation, and cooperation between South America and Africa, all to tackle the challenges we have in the bio-use of forests. We have some work and some workers on this present here today. I mentioned Marcela's group of young people, and these development models depend on a new outlook on the world. This is one of the groups that are being consolidated now, and I am sure they will have a great contribution to offer in the future. Recently, the group of private companies have contributed a lot to the formatting of the ANDC that the Brazilian society wants to take to COP26 and will take it for various sectors, power, infrastructure, gas, infrastructure, showing that the Brazilian contribution can be greater than is being presented currently. And bioeconomy has a huge role to play because it includes social participation and the formation of new types of economy. It is not a challenge jeopardizing economic growth. On the contrary, if there was an idea that a plunge into the field of climate change could result in a reduction of the GDP, it's not the case. The studies show precisely the opposite. And bioeconomy has a central role here, and Brazil has a huge opportunity in this respect. International interaction is also very strong. And there is another material published of a document showing that the Amazon is very heterogeneous. We cannot talk about just one Amazon. On this document, it was considered that there are at least 4 different situations. The preserved Amazon, another portion which was called the restored Amazon, Amazon of commodities, which is very important and very relevant in the social and economic context, and urban Amazon, Amazon of cities. There's more than four different Amazons, but each one of them with its own economic reality. There is much integration between them, but they have their own, they need to have their own tax systems, their own science and technology. The economy of conservation goes beyond the economy of carbon. There is a huge potential here, and it's different from the world of technology and commodities, which have a very important role in the traceability tools, for instance, the blockchain technologies and so on, for commodities to be produced with as little impact as possible, as Tatiana said. So the universes of science and technology are very different. The land tenure world is different. The world of conservation requires the organization of indigenous territories, and the bureaucratic world needs to coexist with that as well. There is much variation from one situation to another. Oh, we have educational technologies, health technologies that are all specific. And I would like to underline the importance of culture in all this process for its power to connect. It allows for the emotional connection that is necessary. We need to feel that for this region. Brazil must be proud to have the Amazon, to have this natural, social and cultural legacy, not as a country that is defending itself. We have the opportunity to be here. We have this bioeconomy, and this, in a way, places us much more aligned with the future of the world than many other countries. We are far more connected to this value than the rest of the world, who are only indicating that they would like to become connected. So the Amazon places Brazil in the world, but the way we deal with the Amazon sets us apart from the rest of the world. I think this is something bioeconomy shows us. Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. This tie between bioeconomy and material and spiritual culture of the peoples of the forest, the indigenous people, the quilombolas, etc. This is essential. And in the science panel for the Amazon, this has been reiterated.
A consulta no site.
And I strongly recommend everyone should look up in the science panel for the Amazon. There are 34 chapters already published with executive summaries. This is going to be launched in the Glasgow conference. Since we're talking about large and small companies, we are going to listen to someone who was brave enough and had the initiative to use her academic knowledge and her experience in the business world, in the world of cosmetics. Gabriela Bianchi dos Santos is graduated in pharmacy by the University of Espírito Santo. She has a master's degree in pharmaceutical sciences and concentration of synthetic and natural products by the University of São Paulo. She has a doctor's degree by the University of São Paulo and a postdoc at the East Anglia University in the UK. Currently, she is a teacher at UFOPA, which is here in the state of Pará, and this brings together her work as a researcher and the business world. I think you have a presentation, have you? Gabriela's presentation, please.
Hello, good afternoon all. First, I would like to thank Professor Ricardo for the kind introduction. And also, I would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation to represent our startup, the Maha Biocosmetics. I would like to reinforce what some of our friends already said, that the Amazon preservation is essential not only for the life of the forests in terms of fauna and flora, but also for the millions of inhabitants who live here, which is linked to what our friend said before us. With this in mind, I would like to show you where we are located. We are here in the city of Santarém, in the state of Pará, by the Tapajós River, where people call the heart of Amazon. And also, we are around 70 kilometers from the Tapajós National Forest, where some of our inputs are purchased from. I'm sure you all know that the cosmetic industries, they are looking for natural ingredient sourcings. However, unethical sourcing of natural ingredients by cosmetic industries are responsible for the destruction of tropical rainforests, threatening the habitats, as we saw already in Malaysia and Indonesia, where the search for the desired palm oil already threatened the habitats there. In Brazil, the situation is not that different. Oils and butters from our rainforests have been on target of big cosmetic industries. For instance, the murumuru, cupuaçu, and cocoa butters, as well as buriti, patauá, and Brazilian nut oils, have been seen in many cosmetic products that we have in Brazil, but also abroad. But unfortunately, what we see is that the actors involved in the production chain of these Amazonian products, they are not valued properly. Another issue is that the environmental and health risks caused by cosmetic finished products are also coming to the spotlight. Microplastics, which are substances that are used in many cosmetic preparations, they accumulate in rivers and seas, disrupting these ecosystems. I'm sure you all have heard about that. And also parabens, which are substances used as a preservative in cosmetic products and is a very cheap product, they present estrogenic effects, which is linked to breast cancer. And here, not to mention the sulfates and silicones, which are also substances used in cosmetics, and they present health risks and also risks for the environment. Another problem that we women see is that the conventional hair products that are on the market, they do not take into account our great diversity. We from AHA, we made a survey, and we noticed that 90% of our public target, they would like to have a natural cosmetic based on their own characteristics. And based on this information, we from AHA Biocosmetics, we developed a technology based on artificial intelligence techniques, for instance, the image capture, which is able to recognize all characteristics of your hair. For instance, if it's curly, natural, dyed, thin, thick, and based on this, we indicate the best Amazonian ingredients to be present in a formula, specific and customized for your needs. Also, of course, we do not use parabens, sulfates, and we do not test in animals. Here I would like to highlight something. We adopt a fair trade policy, so all actors involved in our products, even in the extraction of the products, of course, they are veiled properly for their products and for their service. Here I'd like to show you an image of one of our visits in São Domingos community, which is a traditional community inside the Tapajós National Forest. Here I want to show you our timeline. We started the first ideas of this business in 2019. We started to draft the first ideas. And in 2020, we came up as a team and also start to draw our business plan. Last year, we also participated in a pre-acceleration program, the Amazonia app. And here I need to highlight that they were very important for our business plan development and also to push us to the prototype validation. This year, we participate in the Startup Pará. It's a program of acceleration program. And in the end, we were selected for the financial support. Here I want to highlight that we are in this stage of scale up and stability analysis. And also we are testing in volunteers and also developing our database. By next year, we want to have our online platform and with our e-commerce up and running. Here's our team. It's a team of 5 women. Me, Gabriela Bianchi, I'm a PhD in pharmaceutical science, as well as Cariane Nunes, also professor at the Federal University of Western Pará in Santarém, as well as Carla Paixuba, she's our PhD in computer science. Melissa Cari, she's pharmacy student, undergrad student, and Bruna de Souza, who is our pharmacist. Together, we are the Maha Biocosmetics team. Our goal is to deliver a little piece of the Amazon forest in a formula made for each one of you. Here, I'd like to thank as well the programs that help us to develop our idea. So the State of Pará, the Startup Pará, and also the Centro de Empreendedorismo da Amazônia with the Amazonia app. And I would like to thank you a lot for your attention.
Essa apresentação da Gabriela é muito importante porque ela me faz.
This presentation by Gabriela is very important because it reminds me.
This presentation is very important because it reminds me of the multiplication of initiatives of the Amazon of the last 10 years. We have Conexus, IDESAN, we have the Centro Vida Institute, and several organizations that are activists in the Amazon in the last 10 years. They are now geared to the sustainable entrepreneurship with very interesting results. And I would like to suggest to our friend Yuka that in the next editions of the newsletter in the World Forum of Bioeconomy, because there's a weekly newsletter that is very interesting. And I would like to have products like this be publicized because I have never seen products from the Amazon in the Bioeconomic Forum newsletter of these products. So this is a suggestion, Yuka, that products from the Amazon, products like these that Gabriela's team produces, I think they also should be advertised weekly in the Bioeconomic Forum, which is such an interesting newsletter. Now, I would like to know, do we still have time for questions? I don't know. We have a few minutes for any questions you may have. If anybody wants to ask a question, otherwise, but among ourselves, I'm sure we're going to have plenty of questions for each other. Who wants to say something? Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Stein. I am a journalist specialized in coffee. I would like to ask the teacher because bioeconomy is very new to me, but I want to know if coffee is included. Do you know any activity regarding coffee? I know very sustainable coffees in the state of Rondônia, but I haven't mapped this in the state of Pará. Which professor? Because we have 3 professors here on the stage. Well, whoever wants to answer. Well, this is what works well. You know, this is the structure, the framework of a bioeconomy. It goes through a selection. What you're saying about it decreases inequalities includes science and technology. If it expands the sustainable areas, if you reply yes, 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 then we can include it. This is what we have said about the intelligence that exists in the interior of the Amazon. We see enormous projects arriving in Amazon as if we had nothing at all, and that there were nobody, you know, not people ready for this new world. And look what we see. Congratulations. Well, Professor Tatiana, during the pandemic, she has set up a network of researchers because there is this idea. It's very, there, you know, there lacks a lot of resources. Now there's a whole lot of qualified researchers in upstate in the Amazon, and this network reveals. Would you like to say something about this? Well, for those of you that are interested, go into REHRESI, REHRESI. It's a network for human resources and sustainability, intelligence for the indigenous population. We have launched this RISA network because we understand that intelligence in the Amazon is way beyond what people imagine. And to prove that bioeconomy is a topic of interest, not only for biologists and naturalists. No, we have a question here from an engineer. George. My name is Giorgio Paulos. I'm from the Engineering Institute, and I would like to say that I would ask a question to everyone. When we see large size companies, especially the big banks, they always seek the word scale. They always look for opportunities that have a scale. And we hear comments saying that acai is already a threat to biodiversity. What can we do to bring scale and at the same time protect biodiversity, social bioeconomy, scale for biodiversity? Well, I think this question can be addressed to everyone here. I think it touches on everybody's presentation, but I'm going to be people to answer in a telegraphic way because we're completely run out of time. Well, dignity of work. If we're talking about increasing the scale of dignity, we have to see the scale, because what is happening is we're going back to the era of rubber, because there's so much work, especially women that are very responsible for bioeconomy, the DS8, bioeconomy and gender. Now, to speak of scalability, I think we have to think of the connection with the universities, the research centers, especially speaking from the interior upstate here of the Amazon. So this idea that we brought of our case, it started in the university and it's gaining scale in the university. So the university managers are the ones that have to understand that the innovation environments have to be strengthened in this center of research and in the university, and also in this approximation with the communities. It's not only to go after natural resources, but we have to help them in the scalability of their own products. So I believe we have to join efforts, bring the university close to the communities, and also be a player in the scalability. Flora? Eu não conheço a cadeia de... Não.
scaling the value chain rather than scaling just production or just one part of the value chain. That would be my suggestion.
Thanks, Flora.
Eu acho que escala está ligado a você.
I think scale is linked to having a knowledge of all externalities. We need a map of externalities, a reduction of externalities, and the discussion of this in the scope of governance defining business models linked to large-scale businesses that have the transformation of what today are negative externalities in the ones that are positive. And to generate externalities, I think, is fundamental. Well, thank you. I want to thank all the participants of this panel. I think our panel was just excellent. Thank you once more, Yuka, and the organizers of this forum of bioeconomy and the government of the state, Mr. Barbalho here in Pará and Mário de Almeida. And let's continue now. Teresa, I want to say thank you. Thank you very much.
On the Amazon, on the bioeconomy, on different perspectives on the bioeconomy, on the way forward, and somehow on the way back as well. So I would like to ask you to go for coffee. In 15 minutes, please come back. So we have people waiting in the US and in other parts of the world. So thank you. See you in 15 minutes. 15 minutos, por favor. Temos aí pessoas à nossa espera em várias partes do mundo. Obrigada.